But we're called to order and we have our minute taker and our timekeeper. Okay, so we'll start with public comment. Is there any public comment? Okay. And we have an action to approve the agenda for this evening. May I have a motion? So moved. Thank you. And a second?
Sure.
Mike, thank you. Any discussion or comments about the agenda? Or changes? Okay, all those in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. All right, so we are here this evening to have an update on curriculum, instruction, assessment, and professional development. We're joined by Carly Epstein from the All Learners Network, and we're here for a great presentation. So thank you so much for being with us. Do you want to, are you good where you are? Are other folks going to be presenting or just mostly listening? Because you're welcome to join us if you
We are hero support.
Hero support.
All of us.
Great. We don't have our placards, but maybe we could take a minute to just introduce ourselves.
That'd be great.
Okay. Do you want to start over there?
Hi, I'm Barb Crandall, Moncton. Hi, Barb.
I'm Kevin Hansen, Bristol.
I'm Kristen Toy from Starksboro.
Mike Dash from Bristol.
Steve Rooney from Starksboro.
Sarah Pearl from Haven. Erin Jipper from Bristol.
And then Krista Seringo from Bristol. We're also joined online by Liz Sayre. Go ahead, Liz.
Liz Sayre from Bristol.
And Beth.
Hi, I'm Beth McGeorge. Hi, Carly.
I'm also happy to set a little context.
Great.
If that's okay.
Thank you.
Great, as we talked about. So we are so fortunate at MAUSD that we have been actually for a long time working with members of the All Learners Network through a lot of different trainings with Sandy Stanhope and so many different things, 10, 15 years in the making. But the last 2 years, we have really delved real deep. Happily with the support of some additional funding, we have really been able to dig in and have Carly work really closely with us to look at our mathematics instruction, specifically through the eye of inclusion, and how are we able to not only support our learners to perform better in mathematics, but also in all the transferable skills that we talk about so often. This year, we also have a second coach, which is amazing. So we have Carly working with us more specifically at the K-6 level, and we have a woman named Kathleen working with us at the 7-12 level. So we are lucky, we are excited. And as funding changes, we do want to continue to invest in this support because we are seeing some benefit, not only at the student level, but also just in our own PD and how we're thinking. So Carly's been working with the administrative level. She's worked at the coach level. She's worked at the teacher level and then in classrooms. So really happy to have you here. I know you're battling and getting over an illness.
I am way better today.
You look so good. I'm telling you right now. Compared to a week ago.
Compared to a week ago, that was a different story. That was a different Carly that you would have gotten last week. Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Of course. And just a little background for all of you. I am a local girl. I grew up in Virgins. I currently live in Heinsberg. I was a classroom teacher for 17 years prior to taking on this role with All Learners Network. I taught in Essex, Vermont, primarily in second grade, and then spent a lot of time in leadership as we developed our MTSS and RTI systems through PLC modeling. And I had the privilege of working at the district level to facilitate the implementation of PLCs, and then along with that, all of the support systems we put in place for kids. So that's my background a little bit.
Just a quick aside, could you please spell out the acronyms for us, for those of us that don't know and for those that might be watching?
Yep, so response to intervention is RTI, MTSS, multi-tiered system of support, which we will talk about in a little more detail as we move forward.
And
Thank you
there's a
for calling that out.
PLC.
PLC, Professional Learning Community.
Okay.
So when we think about putting a group of educators together to collaborate toward stronger systems to support kids in their learning, That's what we're really looking for when we talk about some of those systems. I appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem.
So this is my second full year with the All Learners Network. I am a senior facilitator. So the work that I get to do mostly is I hold contracts with school districts around the country, as far as Colorado to as close as a 20-minute drive from my house. And I have the privilege to work with the entire system to support math instruction really truly through the lens of equity and inclusion. So for this hour, Patrick, if I can just ask you to Vanna me to the next slide. So for the next hour, we're really going to look at 3 parts. The first part we're really going to take a close look at is what is ALN? What is the scope of a partnership between a district and our company and our work? And then the second piece is just taking a pause to highlight the work that was done in district last year and how that's moved forward into year 2. So you have an opportunity just to get a little deeper look into what's been happening with ALN and MAUSD. Then the last piece that we will do is I wanted to take an opportunity for all of you to experience some of the work, what that looks like, feels like in schools. It really is a way to just have an experience that talks really closely to what we expect from teachers and students and systems to make sure that we are truly supporting all kids and we're moving the bar for kids. Because if we're not moving the bar, we have to change what we're doing. It's not personal, it's about kids. So how are we thinking about our systems to move kids' education forward in really meaningful ways? Okay. So with any good ALN presentation, if you want to go to the next one, I'm going to ask you to engage in a little bit of math. I already saw some faces. It will be okay, I promise. But I am going to ask you to engage in a little bit of math more than once today to give you a sense of when we mean all, we mean all. And when we really talk about how do we create some different experiences for kids to think about math and engage with math, just to give you a sense of what are some of the things that are happening now in year 2 in your district that are being implemented in many, many classrooms across your district to support kids in more meaningful and inclusive ways. So part of the ALN math structure is launch or number sense routines. So we're thinking about the first 5-10 minutes of a math block. What are we doing to call all kids in to a math experience? So this is an example of a launch routine. They're called same different routines. This one would be very well suited for 3rd or 4th grade, just to give you some context for where it sits. And the prompt would simply be, take a look at these 2 models. What do you notice? What do you wonder? And then specifically, what is the same? What is different about these 2 pictures with the dotted line in the middle separating the 2 models? So the way we think about launch to call all kids in is there's a routine that we ask that everyone's ideas are really important. So we give everybody some private think time. Then we ask everybody, because all of your ideas are important. We're not just looking for the inequitable 3 kids that raise their hand every time. We're really truly looking for all kids to participate. So you've spent time thinking and planning about some ideas you have to compare and contrast these 2 models. Your ideas are so important. Now I want you to talk to the person next to you about your ideas. So go ahead. We're going to actually do a little bit of math together. So when you look at this model, what is the same? What's different between these 2 models? You can all do it, I promise.
The representations of the numbers.
Oh, seems to me that.
It goes to 20.
But you can.
Here's the layout.
Yeah, the one I see. 6 and 4. So I see.
Yeah.
One on the left.
Sure,
is
20
the other
minutes.
one.
I lose such
Right.
I really like 20.
This
This one will be 3. Yeah.
Like So-
magical classroom.
Go ahead. Yes, it is, isn't it? So that wasn't necessarily intentional, but 24 is a magical number.
Yeah.
Let's come back together. So again, I want you to think about and position, education with, what if every math class started like that? What if every math class asked kids to engage in a purposeful, meaningful exploration of number, of critical thinking, of problem solving? That is the goal with ALN, that we support systems to position every kid as a mathematician within the first 5 minutes of class. And by every kid, we mean every single kid that walks through that door. So once kids have had a chance to turn and talk, teachers facilitate this in lots of different ways. But what's so important is that we follow up, elevating kids with important math voices, all kids with important math voices, by publicly recording some of their ideas to talk about and extend the work. So if I'm in a multiplicative unit with third graders, this might be a great way to start a conversation. So, and then I can choose, I don't need anyone to raise their hand. I heard lots of conversation, and I would always prepare a kid. Hey, what you have to say is really important. Could you share that with the group? How does that change equity? How does that change inclusion? I'm not waiting for the 3 kids that I know will always raise their hands, because the message it sends to all the other kids is phew, I'm off the hook. So how do we shift that culture? We do that by some of these routines. To start math class, we call that launch. So just in the interest of time, is anyone willing to share out what are some things that you noticed? Do you think kids might notice is the same or different about these 2 models? And I'm a teacher, I got great wait time.
How they're grouped.
Same one.
Some of them are grouped in 6 and some are grouped in 4. Sorry, maybe more specific. Some of them are laid out so that all 6 groups are represented all the way, and some are more tightly grouped.
So the tightly grouped one, you kind of pointed to the left.
Yes.
So the tightly grouped ones, we have some that are grouped tightly in a circle. And then how would you describe the ones on the other side?
More spread out. I don't know.
Does anyone want to add to her thinking?
The groupings can be changed from groupings of 4 to groupings of 6.
Okay, so
On
you
the
saw
right.
groupings of 4 like she did. So this was a group of 4.
Well, I mean, on the right side, you can see them as groupings of 6, or you could see them as groupings of 4.
Yeah.
Or is it?
Did everybody just notice what happened? What just happened?
Oh.
Oh, that is why this is so powerful. Because you are all adults, and my guess would be I could take the models off and you could solve 6 + 4, or 6 × 4, excuse me. In a class, and in a group of adults just now, there were insights about making sense of some models. That is the power of this work. So then I might ask, wait. With kids, that's like my golden moment when you hear that. Oh, it's like, wait, what are you talking about? What did you just discover? So wait a minute, you're saying this one could be 6 × 4 or 4 × 6? Because I can see the groups of 6 and the groups of 4. So wait a minute, I could write it like this also? Or like this?
1 × 24.
Say more. Where do you see 1 × 24?
I see one, you see a group of 6 and a group of 1.
Right,
Some other agreement?
yeah,
The
yellow
yellow,
rectilinear layout is a single blob of things.
A single blob of things. And it will surprise you what kids start to notice and how we start making connections. Because I might not have anticipated that, but I might be like, oh, interesting. So you're seeing that as a group of 24. So I have one group of 24. Does that work too? So that usually takes about 5-10 minutes. We can time ourselves up to 15, depending on the length of our math block. But that's a place I just wanted to get us thinking about instruction and the work that I've had the privilege to do in your district since the beginning of last school year. This type of routine is happening significantly throughout the district in many classrooms. And it is changing the way teachers see kids engaging in math. So when we think about qualitative data, When I go into buildings, I can have conversations and teachers are like, how have I gone my whole career without this? So many more kids are engaged. So many more kids are interested in math. There's so many answers. As adults, you made some connections. You heard it. What does that do for kids? Some kids are going to say it's blue on this side and it's yellow or orange on the other side. Guess what? If that's their entry point to their math experience, they're part of the community. We are calling them in to engage. And we can build on that and it snowballs. And this is a place for us to start doing that. So it's one of my favorite things. As a facilitator, I have the privilege to go into a lot of classrooms, including in this district, and model these for teachers to help show them, like, look at what kids can really do when we give them the opportunity to talk. And how just that alone starts to shift the culture of teaching by telling to really teaching for understanding, which is a deviation probably from how every single person in this room learned mathematics as a kid. And for some of you are like, no, the procedures were great for me. I was great at memorizing. And for some of you, you might be sitting there like, nope, for me, I could memorize anything you put in front of me. I did not understand. And that expired. I got to high school mathematics and I was like, wait, why don't these proofs work? You're just making things up. I don't understand. And because I couldn't memorize those pieces, I got stuck and had a very negative experience from that point forward because my ability to memorize no longer served. We want kids to deeply understand. That's where the culture shifts from that telling culture to understanding culture. So if you want to keep going. So hopefully through that, you saw an elevated, you saw this mission elevated. Really the work of ALN is to really promote equity and inclusion for all kids. Not just the kids that raise their hand, not just the kids that are getting it, but every single kid is capable of learning and doing math. So how do we put instructional decisions and content choices in front of kids that allows all of them to experience a rich and productive math journey? If you want to keep going. And a deeper part of our equity stance is this why. So ALN has chosen a platform of math education, but really truly it's because we know there are systemic barriers in education. You could look at your demographics, you could look at lots of, you could disaggregate data in lots of different ways, and it would tell some different stories. And most school districts across the United States, some really uncomfortable stories. So we've chosen math education as a way to continue to work toward equity in education. How we do that is we focus on excellent instruction, research-based, evidence-based practices that work for kids and teachers to improve instruction and improve outcomes for kids. And the what part of that is the more we can build this network of educators and systems, that have a deep understanding of some of these choices, the more likely we are to be able to actualize this mission. So the next piece I want to talk to you, and you can just do the next one, perfect. That's fine. So there are 5 key components that we do as facilitators at ALN when we come into a district. The first is really to educate around, other folks can't see that, I don't think.
There you go.
So the first is to educate folks around this idea of high leverage concepts. So there are, like, as we all know, Common Core is what we use for standards in education. So if we're basing all of our instructional decisions on Common Core and the programs that we've purchased for teachers to use, there is a lot of material, often too much for us to cover in 1 year. And if we're just covering material, that's not the art of teaching. The art of teaching is teaching humans, not turning pages. So the work that we do is really to teach systems about this idea of high leverage concepts. So what are the key foundational skills at every single grade level up through algebra that allow kids to be successful in their math experience, to be prepared to move on to the next one? So when we think about your multi-tiered system of supports, this is really, really critical at the tier 2 and tier 3. So kids receiving intervention, kids receiving specialized math instruction. We cannot just plug holes randomly. We need to be intentional, and we need to choose the things that allow the kids to close those gaps and move toward grade level instruction when they are struggling. So that comes through the high leverage concept.
Can I just ask a question about
Yes,
that?
please.
So are you saying, because I know I can imagine a situation where you have a huge, binder of lessons you're supposed to get through for a particular program that we've purchased for elementary math. So is part of your work to help teachers determine what actually with that program, what are the most, or is it more just universal concepts that they can then look at their program and pull out?
It is a little bit of both.
Okay.
So part of it is, and in working with Sheena and some curriculum folks around the development of some of the work that they've been doing over the last couple years, to really be thoughtful about, we need to prioritize some ideas over others.
Yeah.
Because they don't hold equal weight.
Yeah.
So helping districts to understand what we need to prioritize, but prioritization does not mean elimination. It just means how are we allocating time and resources to support all kids to make sure they have what they need.
Mhm.
Grade level instruction is still grade level instruction that all kids have a right to throughout the course of the year. And when kids are really struggling, where do we want to prioritize? That's where we want to make really thoughtful choices about this high leverage concept. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
So the next is the lesson structure. So part of the work in the district has been around really supporting teachers of how do you use your math block? How are you actually structuring instruction during the minimum 60 minutes? We worked toward that. Across the board minimum in your district, we have now gotten everyone to at least 60 minutes of math instruction a day, which is huge. There were inequities across the system that we worked on last year. That was a big, big shift for the middle school folks in particular. But they're taking it in stride and they're doing a really nice job with it. It's a huge celebration. We need at least 60 minutes to make sure that we have these components you experience to launch. Main lesson is like what you would think of as like the math lesson, that time of the math block where everybody is together. Math menu is another piece, huge piece for this district, and a big push for this particular school year. This is a differentiated block of time that is not new instruction. It is very specifically to support all kids and moving toward proficiency that's specific to them. It is also the time for teachers, special educators, interventionists to be providing additional instruction to help all kids, where they're not missing their first instruction. Because we're always pulling kids out of first instruction, they're never going to catch up. Like, that's not how that works. So being really thoughtful about that time of the day has been a really big push for your district this year. And folks have really risen to the occasion. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then this closure, how do we bring people together to kind of synthesize, reflect, to think forward about what's coming in their math experience? You can keep going. We have to do that through formative assessment. So in working with the district, how are you assessing kids to identify what they know and don't know in order to ensure that the instructional moves that you're making are really what's best for kids and are improving their instruction. So again, if we're not improving their instruction based on formative assessment, we have to make a change. You can go ahead to the next one. And part of that is what we call a rapid cycle of inquiry. So if we engage in, let's say, an intervention for a group of kids that maybe aren't quite there yet, they need a specific skill, then that cycle of inquiry is, okay, we're going to try this based on what we know they know, and we're going to pay really close attention to it through assessment. And if it's moving the bar, if kids are making progress toward proficiency, getting to proficiency, we know we've done our job. If not, then what do we do differently? If we believe kids are capable, it is our job to find the right path. So that's that rapid cycle of inquiry. We're always paying attention to if we're moving the bar for kids, if it's working for kids. And then the last piece of the work with ALN is really what I'm kind of here doing with you tonight, is working with the system. So making sure I'm not an accountability holder in this district, making sure that the system sets goals, making sure that that there's accountability measures in place for taking on these important changes. A lot of PD is usually this one-off experience that teachers have at in-service or something like that. And then you're not really sure how it plays out necessarily. You might see it through your early adopters, you might see it through other folks. This is really, our work is deeper than that. The expectation is that we build a trusting, deep relationship to support an ongoing change to a system. So that's that piece about working with systems. You can go ahead to the next one.
Do you suggest incremental benchmark data that like districts can use? You know, every year we look at our achievement in the standardized test scores for English and math, but they're hard to really gauge actual progress. And so we often talk about how can we get a better sense of what our goals are and how we're working toward those.
Yep.
Or is part of your work helping districts to and then
Yes, and MAUSD has some really nice things in place in terms of like their data review days and looking at local assessment plan data as a way to track some quantitative results. Another thing that's always important in terms of me gathering feedback, district gathering feedback about qualitative data. The first couple of years, we know systematic quantitative data change takes years to achieve. Across the board, that is true in education. So what we look for in the first couple of years are from teachers those qualitative responses to how kids are responding to. And then as the years progress, we start looking at trends in that more quantitative data sets, those local assessment plan pieces that they look on. After a number of years, you should start to see it reflected if we can compare apples to apples, if we continue to give the same national or state assessment, right? There's always factors, but yes, there are important parts to make, because we as an educator in ALN, like we always want to be making sure that we're making successful and appropriate change when we work in districts. So yes, that is part of the work. If you want to click through those next pieces. I won't read the cartoon on the right, but it is I think one of the most powerful things when we think about instruction. But just again, here's our lesson structure. This is a big part of the work in year 2, and then looking ahead to year 3. Year 1 and 2 is a lot about launch and menu practices. So how do we get at instructional practices that include all kids? And then that menu piece, what are we doing with assessments when we know kids aren't there yet? How are we responding to kids who already get it? So those 2 pieces have been the focus for year 1 and 2. In the next few years, it really starts to look more at that main lesson. How do we make sure we're asking kids the right kinds of questions at the right time to push their thinking forward in a collaborative and productive way? And then how do we build more of those systems for assessment and response? So we've talked about this a lot, but I wanted to touch just one more time on that multi-tiered system of support. We all know that kids have these fundamental needs that they get in their first instruction. We also know that there is a small population of kids that need something a little different. Within this lesson structure that we promote, we are creating space to give kids respond to those assessments when they tell us these kids aren't there yet, they're close, but here's what they're missing. Here's the time and math menu. Here's the space to do it. High leverage concepts is what we focus on and what we do to get them there. So it's this very structured way that we support systems to really focus on kids. And then that layer 3, there are some kids that need even more specialized support that we can also teach classroom teachers, interventionists, coaches, special educators, how to focus in on those high leverage concepts. What are the models, tools, strategies that get kids there? So really thinking about how do we serve the whole system within this one idea.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yes, please.
So are there also like layers of support for students who are perfectly comfortable with layer one support,
Yeah.
but actually need more.
Yes,
Right, because it
and-
seems to be.
and those same kids fall into layer 2. Because part of what the work of professional learning communities asks for really clear questions. What do we need kids to know? What do we do for kids who aren't getting it? What do we do for kids who are already getting it? Like, those are two of those really important questions, right?
Totally.
So that is also the place for extension. So that is also the place where we can say, okay, this kid's got it. Like, this kid has demonstrated proficiency with this learning target. What do we do to extend their thinking? What do we do to keep them being really critical thinkers and put them in a position to be challenged? Because it's really dangerous to have a kid who's constantly experiencing success without much effort, because eventually they hit that wall and then their identity as a mathematician is destroyed. So that is also the place where we respond.
Appreciate that.
We've gone over some of this, but just to highlight a little bit of the work. So year one is really about, in this partnership, it has to be thoughtful, it has to be intentional, is really about understanding the system. I spent a lot of time with Katrina, Sheena, and other leaders, administrators, coaches. I was in every single classroom in year one. High school was not part of the partnership in year one, so I wasn't in high school classrooms, but every single other classroom I walked through the door and was part of the instructional practices that were happening. I talked with kids, and there was trying together a very deep understanding. What are the strengths? What are the challenges in instruction within the district? And then really thinking about what are some embedded opportunities that we can do to implement change in the system. Year one's always tricky, as you know. If you don't know someone, you're like, who are you and what do you have to offer me, right? So there is a reality that I have to build some connection with folks, that I have to, for them to really believe me. And some of that is me going in and modeling instruction. Some of that is me meeting with teachers, listening to what are the challenges, what are the roadblocks, what are the successes. And then really being thoughtful about, from that, talking with leaders to say, hey, here's what I'm seeing. And the nice piece is, as Patrick and Katrina made space, I think maybe 5 times throughout the year for me to attend admin meetings. Here's what I'm seeing. Here would be my recommendations for buildings for the district. How can we get there? And starting to build that longer term plan to improve math instruction in the district. So we decided on launch and math menu as last year. So how do we think about shifting some instruction with a dip into math menu? And then if you click, Patrick, you can see into year 2, now we're ready to commit to some change practices. We've identified some kind of non-negotiables, that being menu for year 2 as part of that accountability system. And to start that, we offered, I came in and did a 2-day summer course specific to math menu. I think there were 27 district folks in attendance, from coaches, admin, teachers, interventionists, special educators. And then again, at in-service, for folks who are not able to attend the summer, they received some of that same professional development. A very clear message that this is what we're all committed to across the board. So then how do we provide that ongoing support? So this year, it's been a lot more of me in classrooms with teachers with problems of practice, modeling for them, supporting them in their instruction and in their routines around math menu and launch. And then, as Katrina had said, we did add an additional middle level facilitator. My background is really predominantly in elementary education. So to bring on an additional facilitator whose background is in middle level coaching is just good for the system. It's just a good support to have someone with really specific expertise to middle level instruction. So that was a great addition to just split that contract to bring Kathleen into the system. And we'll continue that. And just like we did last year, Katrina and Sheena and I have meetings pretty regularly. How is the work going? What are we seeing? Administrators giving feedback. What are you seeing? Collecting that data. Who's making the change? What questions are they asking? What support do they need to kind of keep our foot on the gas toward these important change practices to improve math instruction? Any questions to that point? That makes sense to folks? As promised, I said we were gonna do more than just one thing of math together today. So I did, in our last, I think we have we started a little after 6, but we have about 20-25 minutes. So the next piece, I do want us to experience a practice that I've used quite a bit in the district, and give you just an opportunity to experience it to some extent. So one piece of the work that we really try to use, we ALN try to use, is this work sort protocol. This asks teachers to collaborate, to deepen their own content knowledge and instructional practices, so they can take those back into their classroom spaces and apply them with all kids to help them move toward proficiency and achieve proficiency at each grade level. And the hope would always be to really start to close gaps, because we do know at MAUSD, we can look at the data, we do know that kids are struggling. So how do we start to shift that culture? So the work sort protocol is an 8-step protocol. The first few steps are really about teacher decision-making and content knowledge for teachers. So the work sort protocol is really a way for teachers to use timely assessment, because we know if we just wait for the end and assess kids, it's like, which is never good. We have to be more proactive than that. We can't just fingers crossed at the end, hope they get it. Which I feel like, again, most of us in the room, that was probably our experience. I don't remember a lot of other assessment opportunities to show what I understood, and carrying a lot of stress about those end of unit assessments. So this is really about making sure that along the way, teachers are attending to how are kids growing, making sure they are constantly making progress toward proficiency in the learning targets. So this work is one of my most favorite things to do when I get the opportunity to work with groups of teachers. But the first part, if you want to switch to the next slide, I'm just going to walk you through a little bit about how it goes. So when I work with a group of teachers, ideally grade level, but in your schools, you don't necessarily have a lot of grade level teams, with the exception of Bristol and Mount Aid. But what we really want to do is we want to deepen content understanding. We do that by doing math together. So this protocol asks teachers to select a task to address this idea of, are we sure we know what the kids are supposed to know? Like, are we really sure we know what are the concepts that we absolutely need these kids to know from this unit? So we also have to make sure we choose tasks that allow us to see what students are thinking. A lot of the assessments I took as a kid were like multiple choice, short answer, bare number. I could have just as easily been like, what'd you get, right? If all I have to do is write down my answer, there's not a lot of deep thinking happening. So the assessments we're asking folks to shift in their practice is being really thoughtful about leveraging more problem solving. And if it's going to be bare numbers, so like 352 plus 675 would be a bare number problem where there's no story or context. We need kids to show what they know so we can use it to make instructional decisions. It is very hard if we don't know deeply the content models and strategies to make judgments about whether they know it or not. So this first part is about choosing a task that allows us as educators to really see what kids are thinking. So requiring more than just an answer, and requiring some modeling, requiring some strategies in the application of those to solve the problem. So I want to just put you through the exercise that I would put teachers through. So once we've decided on the task, the adults do it. And even though you might think, well, first grade math isn't that hard, it's like numbers and adding, like that does not make us experts at teaching it. It doesn't make us experts at understanding how kids think about it. So how do we ask educators, how do we put them in a position to deepen their understanding of even what we think might be simple content, so they can really effectively respond to kids who think in lots of different ways? Because our job as educators is not to teach kids to think like us, it's to think for themselves. So if that's the goal, what are we doing? Do we know enough? Because the default then is think like me. If the default is think like me, we're much more likely to teach kids procedures and algorithms because that's how we were taught. That only works for about a third of the kids. So are we willing to sacrifice the other 2/3? I would hope not. I would hope that a school board and a district would say, no, please don't. So we have to move beyond that, right? Like we have to get past that. You can go to the next slide. If you have a piece of paper, if you want to do it in your head, let's say we've decided second grade. This would be part of a second grade standard, just to position that for you. How would you expect, what ideas do you have about how kids might solve this problem? Take a couple minutes. How would you solve it? And how do you think kids might solve it? I know a lot of you are like, I'm going to stack that. I'm going to stack those two numbers.
Carry.
I can see it on your
Carry
face.
the one.
Can you find another way? Just try it. I know a lot of you are like, wait. Can you write it the other way? No. That's very intentional also. And nobody's allowed to take their phone out. Sheena.
Liar.
Caught.
You want us to say something?
In a second, yeah. Some people I see are still like, well, how else would you solve it? This will be a
Unless
great
you've had
learning
kids that have
opportunity,
gone through
right?
that.
Unless
I'm cheating.
kids that have gone through, it's been a while for me, but I know there were lots of ways. Anybody have any ideas about how kids might solve this without an algorithm?
Break the numbers apart.
Similar. How would they break the numbers apart?
So 100 plus 200, 50 plus 20, 4 plus 7.
And then
Something
just
like that.
sum it.
Break them into smaller parts, yeah.
Yep. And then put it back together for
Mhm.
your day one. Did any one of you that are like, I know the algorithm, struggle to do that in your head?
Struggle to do that.
Struggle to like without this? Like actually struggle to do the algorithm in your head? I can't. I have a really hard time with that. Other folks were fine with it. That's incredible. You can actually like picture it and
I grouped mine in 25s and then I added the last little bits that was left over.
Yeah, that's,
I've never had anyone say anything like that before. Can you please say more about that?
Yeah, I just was like, it's 150 and 225. And
Gotcha.
I went there and then I added what was missing, 6.
So you said 150 plus 225.
Yeah, I don't know why, but that's what I did.
because the fives are usually there.
Well, 5s and 0s, multiples of 10.
Right.
Kids love themselves some multiples of 10.
Right.
And we want them to. That shows a lot of deep understanding of number sense and flexibility. So this is a much easier problem to think about, even especially for second graders, right? Like immediately they're gonna be like, oh, that's 375. And then they just have to hold on to the difference. Right? Like there's still the 4 and the 2. So 7 more would be 381. 6 more. Yeah. Anyone solve it differently? Did anyone learn something from her strategy? Yeah, right? Like, man, that would have been way easier.
I had people explain the other two methods when this has come up.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh yeah, we should do that, but
We're used to it, right?
I had.
Mhm.
it's not difficult, just been doing it like
Right?
the old fashioned.
This blows people's minds when we're like, you don't have to start with the ones. And what really is important about this, and I love to bring this up for folks, Like, the algorithm certainly has its place. Like I said, we sacrifice a lot of kids by just focusing on the algorithm, and it actually causes more misconception for the other 2/3 than leading them to any kind of conceptual understanding, because there's so many steps. It does not mean it is the most efficient, and I'll show you why. What's the answer to that?
Is that minus?
Yes, it's minus 302 minus 298.
4.
Did anyone try to double regroup there?
No, I number one.
Did anyone go, oh, wait, this
25.
number's,
29 with a 12.
Yeah, I've started to.
did anyone
I
go,
was.
oh, wait,
I was. But that's what we make
No.
the kids do, and it's so more fraught for error.
100%. This is like the last thing I would want some kid to do. I would want them to use their number sense, look at those numbers, think critically about them, and be like, I'm just gonna add up.
Right.
When we teach kids that there is a right way, they stop thinking about numbers. This is the best example of them all. 13 minus 7. You see it? What happened?
You do the same thing.
Which so satisfying though. This cripples 3rd and 4th graders. They, in 1st and 2nd grade, they can solve this like 6 different ways and are like, that's easy. What are you talking about? I'm going to add up. I'm going to get back to a friendly 10. I'm going to do all these things. The second they learn an algorithm, they're like, ooh, this is quick. This is just some steps. I've memorized the steps. And then they're like, I don't know 13 minus 7. Because I just rewrote the exact same problem. It didn't get me any closer to solving. It is a very powerful exercise to realize that this does not equal efficiency. In some cases, it's actually the least efficient thing that we could do to kids. You will have some kids try it and they do these wild things when they don't understand. Where they do these crazy things where they're like, because they think that's what they're supposed to show you.
Yeah. So they know the answer, but they're just like.
And then they're gonna write something down like, they've lost intuition. They're no longer thinking mathematically. All they're doing is like, oh, I've seen this. You're supposed to cross some of these ones out. And then you write these other little numbers over here. Like, this makes no sense. And I have seen more than one child do this. They were the kids that were sacrificed to the algorithm really early on. Yeah.
I have a question for, I believe you in all this.
Yes.
My question though is, the algorithm does break down the number into a manageable, into tens.
So does this.
Well, I know it does, but I'm just saying,
Yeah.
it's not like the algorithm is not breaking down the number into a more manageable.
Sure,
No.
they're looking at the challenges for a lot of kids. They don't understand the value of these digits. So when they start to break those down, they're looking at this as 0 minus 9. And they say things like, you can't take 9 from 0. So I have to cross this 3 out. It's not a 3, it's a 300. And make a new group. So I have 100 minus 90. Most kids don't have that depth of knowledge of the way these numbers, the value of these numbers. So it becomes proceduralized. Once kids have a deep understanding of how those numbers are put together and organized, I know we're looking at 2 different problems, but you get the idea. How they understand these numbers are organized, then they're more likely to kind of discover something like this to make sense of it. Like I said, there are a very small population of kids who could really explain
No,
that.
no, I totally, I have 3 kids
Yeah.
who did this.
Yeah.
They didn't do the algorithm. Just me.
Right? I know, it's always the adults. It's always the adults. Because really we're looking at conceptual understanding. Guess what calculators do? Algorithms. So we don't need to teach kids what technology is already doing for them. We need to teach them to be critical thinkers and problem solvers. That is the goal. That is the shift from teaching by telling to teaching for understanding. The more time we ask teachers to engage in, like, what is the math we're asking kids? What do we expect from kids? What do we hope we see from kids? That's where that work sort becomes this really powerful tool, because it asks kids, it asks teachers first, do we know effective models and strategies that we want kids using to solve when they add 2 3-digit numbers? And if we don't, here's an opportunity when we do it together to learn from each other, to build our own bank of expertise with the easy math. It's not easy math if we only have one way to solve it. So how do we start to build teachers' capacity for understanding deeply lots of different ways to solve this problem? Because there may be some kid that uses concrete tools. There may be some kid that can draw a picture. We want kids doing all of those different ideas because that builds connection to deep conceptual understanding. When we go through, I know we just have a couple minutes left. Once we have decided as a group of educators, like, here's what we expect to see from kids, it becomes very powerful when we give the assessment and then look at it. If no kid has used something we've all agreed is really important, immediately in our instruction, we're like, well, we thought that was really important and we thought kids would do it, and nobody did. What do we need to do differently? Now we're responding to this formative assessment in really effective ways. We want to make sure, once we've given the task, that the writing piece is not a barrier. If we're really caring about the math, we need to make sure we give time and space for how do we get at that. It might be oral for some kids. If they use concrete materials, we take pictures of them, because we care about understanding, not if they can all do it pencil paper.
Concrete meaning like manipulative.
Yes, yeah, tools, base
Can
10 pieces,
Can I ask
counters.
about the 4? Because I look at that and I go, it's 4, and I don't want to be like, as a kid, oh, you know, like, oh, I didn't show my work. Well, I just know the difference between those 2 numbers. I visually see it. I'm super efficient.
Yeah.
I have a good number sense.
Oh, I would
Why
love
actually-
the kid to say, I can just see it, because then I'm like,
Why-
what do you see?
Right, but why, so what are you expecting for and showing your work then if you don't want to see the work shown? I think that's where,
Like this?
yeah. So I don't want to do that. I just know it's 4.
Okay, so I might say, well, I know, so then I would always ask, how would you teach it to somebody else? You visualized it, how'd you visualize it? Like on a number line, like what did you see?
Right, so if a kid doesn't write that down though, are you, like, how are you instructing teachers to assess that when you're not explaining their?
They would have
answer?
to interview the kid and ask them what they did in their head. Part of being a mathematician, mathematics is a collaborative endeavor.
Yeah,
So how do we teach it to someone else? How do we make connections too?
okay,
So like, I might see a kid do 298. I know that it's 4. So how would you teach it to someone else? Well, duh, plus 2 is 300. Plus 2 more. 302. Right. It's 4. Done.
okay,
I did it on a number line. 298 plus 2 is 300 plus 2, 302. My answer is 4.
okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I just get stuck sometimes between like evaluating a number sense versus evaluating a communication of that.
Yep.
Number sense, so.
Yep. If the kids are not able to represent a model,
Yeah,
you always question their understanding.
okay,
Really, kids should be really true understanding. They should be able to represent it concretely, like with physical tools.
Yeah.
Representationally, more like a number line, doesn't have to be a number line, that's an example. And then more abstractly, this would be an abstract model, because there's nothing here to support quantity.
I would have done them.
Perfect.
in this case.
When we want, the next step for teachers in this process is we want them to hide student names. Well, as a classroom teacher, I always have kids put their names on the backs of these, because we're evaluating the math, not the kid. We have a lot of preconceptions and sometimes misconceptions about students when we know whose work it is. That was just a silly mistake, when in reality, that kid has no idea, you know, but they're a high kid. So we let it slide. Really dangerous. We evaluate the math, not the kid, hide the name. We sort by strategy. So this case, strategy, different than model. This is an equation as a model. This is a number line as a model. We talked about, you saw area models with the 6 times 4 in the cubes, the loops and groups with the stars. Those are models. The strategies they applied, they decomposed both numbers. This case, they used the inverse and added up as a strategy. So again, where are teachers' level of understanding between critical models and strategies? We're after for instruction. This is a place for them to learn and reflect on how their instruction is going when they sort by strategy. We agreed adding up is a critical strategy for subtraction. Nobody did it. So what do we do with our instruction? We don't just keep pushing on. They don't understand the relationship between addition and subtraction. They're going to start to really struggle moving into multiplication in 3rd grade. Question pile is always reserved for the kids that we have no idea what they did when we look at their work. Doesn't mean they don't get it. We just have a little more work to do. Once we've sorted by strategy, we have a good sense of what kids know, understand, and can do with this formative assessment. This is the most critical part I work with teachers on. It's really challenging. Education right now is all about data. Because is it Act 173? I always get the number wrong.
Sure.
Right? Like that's a big part of it. We have to collect so much more data. We have to do so much more documenting. Well, what data are we collecting? What's usable? Kid work is usable data. Then what do we do with it? This is the part that takes 2/3 of that PLC, that professional learning community meeting. We can't just talk about what kids can and can't do. We have to do something. So what happens the next day in our instruction to respond to what the kids are showing us and telling us? These are some of the choices that I work with teachers to make some shifts in their instruction. I can't just keep going, fingers crossed, they're going to figure it out. I use that balanced math block. Do I make a new launch routine that gets at the inverse because nobody used it? Do I put some activities in math menu that's not new instruction, separate additional time to have kids play a game where they're finding the connection between addition and subtraction? Do I want to share some of the kids' models and strategies and have them make connections to it? We have to be more active in our decision-making from what the kids are telling us to what we do. And that's a huge part of the work that I get to do with teachers when I come into schools and supporting them either through model teaching, interviewing them, looking at their student work with them to support some next steps for instruction. I'm just touching your computer, you good?
Go for it.
After I've done it like 12 times. We have lots of resources in the last couple of minutes. Are we good for a couple more minutes? We have a lot of resources as part of what we bring to a partnership. We have an entire online portion of our company that many folks in the district have signed on to as a commitment to the work, that we know this work of a balanced math block is so important. So how do I supplement my instruction to support all kids? This is an example of one tiny little piece of some of the work that we offer through our online and our partnership. So here is a slide that defines for 2nd grade the critical models and strategies for addition that all 2nd graders should be able to make sense of and apply independently by the end of 2nd grade. So when we partner that with a work sort, how does this work help support teachers in building their conceptual understanding of really where we want kids to be in terms of their models and strategies? Because they can use these resources along with what they're seeing from kids. And to your earlier question, putting it next to what are the program resources they have? Are the programs addressing some of these critical models and strategies? And if they're not, how do we supplement? Where does that go? What does that look like? We have many resources that help support teachers graphically like this to make sense of those high leverage concepts and critical math ideas that I use often throughout the system to help support folks that are trying to make that decision of what can I do next? What can I do next? Okay, in the interest of time, we're going to go past that part. Again, that's really the work sort piece of it. And then following that up with what resources do we have available to respond? And that's another piece of the work. Like I said, our online platform, we offer launch resources. We offer literally thousands of math menu resources that teachers can say, okay, I have these group of kids that are working on this particular skill in their small group. I'm going to have them play this game that I got from Carly from ALN online. I don't have to go anywhere else. I have it as part of my subscription to the online resource to then support it. So it does kind of go full circle in terms of I come in, offer embedded PD. I work with coaches, administrators. There are some early adopters from last year to leverage. The very cool thing that started to happen in the district is some teachers from other schools have gone to watch some of their colleagues teach. Based on, hey, like Sharon at Moncton is doing these really incredible things with math menu in kindergarten. There are some Bristol teachers who are like, I want in on that. So they went and spent time with Sharon in her classroom to learn from her. Ultimately, that's what we want. That's a self-sustaining system when teachers are actively seeking each other out. And that's a huge celebration as part of the work. The middle school team last year went from pretty disjointed collaborative group to a very coherent collaborative team as part of the work. That's moving that hope to belief. And I hope some of these things work to like, wow, I'm seeing these things work. I'm seeing the qualitative, quantitative results for kids. Yes.
So you're talking about, you had mentioned before that most of your work is done at each elementary school. I'm thinking elementary schools, so each school, sort of like the silo. And you're working up and down the grades as opposed to across the grades. And it was great to hear you say that some teachers are taking that on themselves.
Yep.
To cross-pollinate, but what's the strategy from you enabling to make sure that all 4 second grades are in sync? Because it all comes together at junior high.
It does.
And if they're not in sync coming up through there, then
you have an equity issue.
Yeah, I mean, and so it seems to me like it's really important to go across grades, even though there's a travel windshield issue there, to make sure that everybody's lockstep in each one of those grades.
Yes. Part of the work last year, there was a lot of conversation about how do we get people across district in the same room more often, whether it's online, whether it's the early release days, how are we using the early release times to put those district teams around the same table in the same room. Right now, there's additional work happening in the district where grade level teams are coming together around the curriculum work with Sheena to really look at and make sure they are more lockstep. They are looking at what are the instructional practices, what are the tools and resources that we're using with all kids. And then when I come in and I have the ability to go to all of the buildings, connecting all of the principals to say, hey, here's what I'm seeing. Here's how this is going. Here are some next steps for us to think about. And in year 2, that's a pretty good place to be in terms of like, okay, we have to start putting these people in the same room. And that is Katrina will tell you, that was a large conversation last year. It will continue to be, how do we get past this barrier of distance between the 4 elementary schools? Because you lose a lot of time driving to put people in the same room. Like that's a reality. You have an hour-long meeting and you've just spent 20 minutes getting people into the same room. So how do we set up some systems that allow that to be facilitated really productively to make that happen? I am 100% with you. I think that's a really important goal in terms of accountability and equity throughout the system.
So, and we've done a lot of different things to work on horizontal alignment is what you would call that, right? So we have our early release days are a great time, but when you think about, there are only 7 of them and they're only a few hours long and there's so much work to do. And if I'm an elementary teacher, I'm not only responsible for mathematics, also responsible for literacy, instruction, science, social studies, all those pieces. So how do we prioritize, really dig in? And we also have been offering what we call curriculum camps in June, right as soon as school gets out. There's always been a great group of elementary teachers who have come together to kind of refine, continue to do the work, to particularly map out our curriculum documents, and now getting deeper into the instructional scope and sequence together. So even this year, as early as September, there were teachers who were lobbying for, we need more time outside of early release curriculum camp. We want to get together with the other K teachers and continue to really map out what does my scope and sequence look like beyond, as far as they were able to get in June into November, December. Some real strong advocates for wanting to have that extra time, and principals got really behind that, not planned by us,
Yeah.
but
Which is
really
a
like,
really nice shift.
which was
which is a
exciting.
huge
That hasn't
shift.
happened.
Yes,
That hasn't happened.
yes. How do we learn from each other? How do we use the other experts in our district to support our own level of understanding and our own knowledge?
But and then the other thing is, they have all these other subjects, I get that, but they could use that model to cross-pollinate all those other subjects too.
There are some really beautiful things in the work that I get to do with ALM to support other, I mean, I was a second grade classroom teacher. I taught every subject. Like, I know I always come here and I'm like, yeah, I'm the math person, but I applied all of these practices that I just shared with you to every subject that I taught throughout every single part of my day. I had a literacy menu. I was integrating all parts of science and social studies with ELA, with math. So there has to be that deep level of knowledge and support to get folks there, to give them that message that that is okay. Like that work is really important. And by giving teachers the time and space to do that, like Katrina just spoke to, is a really, really important step toward that. Other questions for me? I felt like I gave you a very whirlwind hour of the work and a bit of the experience. Any questions, thoughts you're having?
I have a thought. I think you answered it. Oops. But I think about new hires coming into the system and, you know, I think they're hopefully taken under the wing of that grade level and being brought up to speed. So they're doing the same, they're using the same best practices.
With our continued partnership in some schools, there have been new teachers. There's a new teacher in Bristol, for example, that I went in, spent some time in her classroom, did a little like on the spot kind of co-teaching with her. Cause again, there's that, who's this lady that's in my room, right? And before I left, she's like, when are you coming back? We need to do more of this. Like my colleagues are talking to me about this. That's part of the benefit of a partnership with us, is truly that I do keep showing up, right? You know, like a lot of professional development, it comes and goes. I keep showing up, which I love because, you know, as a human being, I love that connection. But for this teacher to say, wait, next time you're here, let's come back. They've been talking to me about this. Can we talk more deeply? So ideally, I do work myself out of a job after a certain number of years, that there is a self-sustaining system that supports new hires. One thing in year 2, year 3, toward the end of this year and into next year, is really starting to think about, where is there a district committee of strong advocates? You do have 3 coaches in your district. You also have some very strong educators and special educators and interventionists. So how do we kind of call upon that group of people as a math committee to really learn deeply the process and coaching support that I'm coming in to provide? So that if you have a coach leave, look, you've got somebody ready to step in to continue to support the work moving forward. So that's that other piece about, how do we work with systems and support systems? Like that can't all happen in 1 year. That's so many changes. But as we move forward, how do we start to name and identify those folks that can be leaders to sustain the work? So when you have turnover in staff and you have enough years where it's not like, remember that cool ALM thing we did for a couple of years? Like, which unfortunately in systems, that happens when you have turnover. That's a reality. You don't have people with the same prior knowledge and background knowledge. So you have to build a structure within your system that has this group of leaders that will facilitate that work regardless of the periphery changes. Thanks. Yeah.
I want to be mindful of the time.
Yes.
And I feel like we could have you here for a lot longer. So I wish.
I
we
hope
had
that's a
more
good thing.
Time. It is a good thing.
Good.
But thank you so much for being with us. for the
Yes,
work you're doing
of course.
for our district.
It is truly a privilege to be part of the district. And watching the changes that I saw from the first year, where it was really kind of this hesitancy of, but how long are you gonna be here? To,
Now, who else do I have to talk to?
right, to this, and I'll use Bristol as an example, I keep gesturing toward Anne. To this time, when I come to Bristol, people are like, wait, I haven't had Carly, when do I get Carly? Like,
Yeah.
my schedules are full. And teachers are like, wait, and it's like, I'm here for the whole school day, and I'm telling you, Ann and I have it dialed in right now, like, there is not a lot of loose time in between when I'm in point A and point B. But from last year to be like, well, what do you have to offer?
Mhm.
To this year, literally, my schedule is full the moment I walk in the door.
That's pretty good adoption, I would say.
It's incredible. The changes, especially at Bristol, is really a place to celebrate. In particular, other schools, absolutely, there are a lot of really great things happening. It is night and day at Bristol from year 1 to year 2.
And I think that layered piece that you spoke to, the support you're providing us as an admin team, coming in and having us do some of these same activities together, so that principals know what they're looking for when they're doing walkthroughs, when they're providing feedback to their teachers. That's all a critical layer to this whole thing. And then the connection that you have with the coaches, because you are only one person. And so it's wonderful. Your dance card is full, and that is also happening with our other coaches.
Yes, which
Because
is new
you are-
too.
Yes.
Yes.
Because you are connecting with them so deeply, and they can see the extension and the collaboration and the calibration
Yeah.
of the fact that I can't get Carly. Okay, well, but I know there's another coach and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So that's all happening too. So
Yeah,
they're all.
the coaches
also-
I usually ask the coaches to be with me, whatever building that I'm in. And we also try to set aside a time to meet myself and the coach, or maybe with the teacher, so they get to deepen their understanding, which they're like, oh, I'm getting asked to do these coaching cycles, which is great. And then the administrative level, actually giving them documents. Hey, when you go into classrooms, these are actionable things that we've been working on that you should start to see. And a lot of the admin showed up for the math menu training, so they had the depth of knowledge to support their staff. Year 1 to year 2 has been a phenomenal transformation across the district. And I am very grateful to be a part of it. And like I said at the very beginning, I'm a local kid. I grew up rival, maybe I shouldn't have said Virgins, right? Ooh.
No.
Yeah, so, but really, truly, I just wanted to share that with all of you. It is a privilege to come to this district. I look forward to it every day I have the opportunity to come. Thank you for letting me join you this evening. I can't remember, I know Katrina and Patrick and Sheena and lots of people in the room have my email. If any of you have questions and want to reach out, please, always feel free to do so. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Appreciate that
Yeah,
so
of
much,
course.
so much. All right, we're going to adjourn so that we can switch to committee meetings, so, if I could get a motion to adjourn, that would be great. Steve, and a second?
Aaron.
Aaron. Okay, all those in favor of adjourning at 7:16, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, great. Thank you, everyone.